The Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi as he arrives at the Saudi Consulate in Istanbul. Minutes later, the Washington Post columnist would be murdered inside the building by Saudi agents. Now a UN expert says his enemies at the very top of the government are to blame.
The execution of Mr. Khashoggi was the responsibility of the state of Saudi Arabia.
Shortly after Khashoggi entered the embassy, these two men left. One of them was dressed to look like the journalist, complete with a fake beard. This picture shows the two suspects in the background, apparently disposing of evidence. Members of the hit squad then left the country on this private plane. But despite the cover-up, the UN believes it knows who the brains behind the operation were.
What I do have is evidence suggesting that the responsibilities of high-level officials may be engaged and therefore is requiring further investigation, in particular of the Crown Prince.
Mohammed bin Salman is literally the power behind the throne in the Desert Kingdom. Jamal Khashoggi was a vehement critic of MBS, as he's known. The report cites unverified leaked conversations in which bin Salman is accused of saying he'd like to use a bullet on Khashoggi. Weeks after the journalist's death, Saudi prosecutors charged 11 men with his killing. But the UN report finds that others are still free. Its expert says sanctions should be implemented against those who are behind this crime, including possibly the Crown Prince.
It is a logical step for me to be asking for him to be included in the sanctions until and unless there is evidence provided that he was not involved.
Jamal Khashoggi was 59 years old. He's survived by his fiancée and 4 children. His widow Hatice Cengiz has welcomed the report, and she's joined calls for the world's top powers to take responsibility and ensure that justice is done.
Agnes Callamard joins us now. She's the UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial executions who issued that report. Thanks so much for joining us today. How did you reach the conclusion that there is, quote, credible evidence that Saudi authorities were involved in Khashoggi's death?
So the first important finding of my inquiry is about the responsibilities of the state of Saudi Arabia. Until now, the Saudi authorities have insisted that this was not a state-sanctioned crime, but a rogue operations. What my report shows is that the killing of Mr. Khashoggi meets all of the criteria for a state crime. It was conducted and done by state officials. It relied upon state means and state resources. The team that came into Istanbul used a private jet with diplomatic clearance. The killing took place in the Saudi Consulate. The Saudi consul himself took action so that there were no witnesses on the day, at the time of the killing. These and other evidence presented in the report mean that there is no other conclusions but that the killing was what we call a state killing.
Okay, if it was a state killing done by state officials, as your report found, with state resources, does that mean that the Crown Prince bin Salman is responsible or liable for the killing of Khashoggi?
So my investigation is a human rights investigation focusing heavily on the responsibilities of the state. In that context, I have considered individual liability only to identify whether or not there was, in my opinion, sufficient credible evidence mandating an international criminal investigation. My conclusion is that on the basis of what I have found and analyzed, there is indeed credible evidence demanding a criminal investigation into high-level officials, including the Crown Prince. What I also want to insist upon is that the possible liability of the Crown Prince is not only derived from whether or not he ordered the crime. The search for a smoking gun is important, but it is not the only form of responsibilities for a high-level official. Within a civilian setting, there is something close to a chain of command and a range of responsibilities associated with it. For instance, did the Crown Prince or someone else directly or indirectly incite the killing of Mr. Khashoggi? Did the Crown Prince or someone else knew about the proposed killing but failed to take action to prevent it? Did the Crown Prince or someone else knew or should have known that the killing of Mr. Khashoggi was a possibility in light of the multiple violations of human rights that had taken place in the year preceding his killing? All of those issues must be the object of an in-depth criminal investigation.
Okay, where should this criminal investigation take place? What should the jurisdiction be?
So my recommendation is that the international criminal investigation be conducted at the level of the United Nations. I call upon the Secretary General to appoint a panel of experts that will look into individual liabilities on the basis of the evidence.
Agnes Callamard, Special UN Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Executions. Thank you so very much for your time today with DW News.